All right, I am Tyler Kurtz, student number 2002-78480. This is my final policy paper video and presentation. I am a 35-year-old male and am not great with technology, as I'm sure a lot of my classmates are. So I couldn't figure out how to get the audio over top of the PowerPoint. So this is how I'm going to do it, and hopefully that's okay. So I researched social policy and homelessness. I looked at specifically like the broad Canadian social policy and then the regional municipality of Regina social policy. So I'm going to start my video by kind of moving through the federal policy and then moving to how that impacted the municipal social policy making in Regina, and then I'm going to explore that social policy level for the most part. So social policy and homelessness. Social policy is integral to a happy, healthy, comfortable population. When done incorrectly, it can lead to major issues in a country, province, or municipality. This presentation will explore Federal Government of Canada's homelessness social policy history, the municipal government of Regina's homelessness social policy, and Regina's current approach to homelessness and improvements that I think could be made. The takeaway for myself and other future social workers will be the last two slides. Canada, federal government, and homelessness policy history. Coming out of the Great Depression, Canada had a large number of poor citizens. Many of these were homeless or unable to meet basic needs. The National Housing Act of 1944 is kind of the high point in our policy making history when it comes to homeless policy. It recognized shelter as a basic human right. It included cost sharing agreement of 75% federal funding and 25% provincial funding for housing. And it led to a significant increase in public housing. From there on out, for the 50s and 60s, things went pretty well. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we start seeing a decrease in federal funding. Citing economic issues, the federal government pulled back funding from the 1970s to the 1990s. By late 1990s, the cost sharing was pulled back to 33% federal, 33% provincial, and 33% municipal. Excuse me. The Canadian federal government failed policy attempts to combat homeless issues. So this is more from 1999 on. So they had the NHI, the National Homeless Initiative, in 1999. It was largely seen as successful, but fell through due to a lack of long-term funding from the federal government. It was rebranded to the HPS in 2014. The HPS was the Homeless Partnering Strategy. It was a victim of the same lack of long-term funding commitment by the federal government. It almost went down in 2015. They were going to pull funding until lobbying secured 5 more years of funding. The Liberal Trudeau government then took over, and they have promised a return to the National Housing Strategy of the past. A lot of those government commitments and promises haven't panned out, so I don't know how optimistic we can be. Moving to Regina, Saskatchewan, the recent homeless policy history. So impacted greatly by the federal policy response or lack thereof from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, all the way to present day. The city moved with the neoliberal push of offloading projects to non-for-profits or other organizations. Regina first chose the YMCA as its designated community entity responsible for the homeless issue in 2012. Before deciding they were ineffective and switching to Namrand as their designated community entity responsible for the homeless issue in 2020. And I'm going to get into kind of what Namrand's doing currently in a minute. So social discourse was heading in the wrong direction and highlighting, I talk more about this in my paper, highlighting more of the negative attributes of being homeless, and public opinion was not on the side of homelessness until about 2022-2023. So the Regina encampment and resulting social discourse. Regina initially promised but then excluded homelessness funding from their 2022 budget. In protest about a year later, a homeless encampment sprung up on the City Hall front lawn in the summer of 2023. By late July 2023, the encampment was forcefully taken down, citing safety concerns. A fire broke out. The residents were removed and a fence was constructed around the yard so that they couldn't get back in. This forced the issue into public discourse. when the public began to put pressure for change on the municipal government. I'm going to go to kind of the demographics of who was impacted and who is currently impacted. So Namrand, who is doing the 5-year plan, they did a 2024 point-in-time count of Regina homeless population, and they found that the homeless population is 75% Indigenous, 58% male, 33% female, 16% LGBTQ+, 9% youth, 3% seniors, and 3% immigrants. Moving forward to the City of Regina's current discourse and approach. So after the encampment crisis, the city changed its language. They are now committed to a person-centered approach to managing homeless encampments. I'll go into what that means when I get to their current plan. The city declared a homeless crisis in 2025. So their current plan includes $2.5 million funding towards community and safety well-being, a plan to end homelessness, and an encampment response plan. That comes with an additional provincial commitment of $1.1 million for warming sites and for the staff to run those warming sites. A designated encampment site has been proposed, but they refuse to be specific about how many staff would be present, where the encampment would be, and they cited the high cost of staffing and safety risks like fires as the reason that they're not being specific. So it's yet another time where we see the government saying they're going to do something but not giving very specific commitments, and I'm going to go into that more with the Namrand policy that we're going to look at. So Namrand's 5-year plan to end homelessness. The policy aims to eradicate homelessness in Regina by 2030. Focus on 4 main areas: leadership and implementation, coordinated access and data sharing systems, housing and support, and prevention and diversion. Prevention and diversion are kind of this policy more or less existed before. Namrand changed a couple things and added prevention as the 4th arm of the program. Issues I have with Namrand's plan. The planned resources do not account for any growth in the homeless population numbers, despite pointing out a 255% increase in the last 10 years and referencing 25,950 households that are on the brink of losing their housing. The supplies they're putting in place to house the people are only looking at the number that we have currently and not looking for any increase. So we'll see how that goes. Probably not well. Mentions several vulnerable populations in their point-in-time count, but leaves most of these populations out when it comes to an actual plan. They mentioned beds specifically for youth, but they left out a lot of those other populations. Mentions funding that they would like to have, but uses non-committal language and offers little actual financial commitment, which again is what we've seen federally and municipally before. Personal learnings and takeaways. The neoliberal shift is leading to a shifting of responsibility, not only financially, but social accountability away from governments and towards private and non-for-profit organizations. I talk about this more in my paper as kind of don't look at us, we didn't do it, look at them. And that way the governments don't have to be accountable for what they do. They're just giving funding and wiping their hands of it. Social policy only becomes the focus when other financial commitments are met and the social policy issue has evolved into a crisis. By then, it's kind of too late and the price becomes way more. Underfunding social policy issues just leads to the government having to spend more money when the crisis breaks out. Takeaways for social work as a whole: we must use our access and privilege to put ourselves in the right rooms and then advocate for those who cannot be heard for themselves. I go into that more in my paper, and then highlighting the reactionary financial funding that will be saved if social policy is properly funded to begin with is probably our best hope. I've learned, not just in researching this paper, but just over life, that a lot of these organizations and governments only listen to money talk, and my thesis is that if we can convince them that it's going to cost them more money not to do social policy correctly, then maybe they'll do it in order to save the money. The end, please see final policy paper for references, and I will attach this PowerPoint as well in case the video can't see it clearly or I didn't do it justice. Thank you. The end.